Thank you so much, Sasha. Thank you, Newspeak House. Thank you, all of you, for coming. I'm really grateful. Thank you for your interest in QRI, the EPRC, Emergence benefactors, meditation, neuroscience, psychedelics, and whatever else we're here to talk about. So I hope it is a fun, and educational evening. Can you hear me okay despite my interesting mask? Yes?
Yes.
Great. I'm the last person on the planet who still thinks COVID is really bad for you. I happen to be an infectious disease epidemiologist who also keeps up with all the latest research. And should any of you at some point decide to protect your brains and immune systems, may I recommend the GBS Lips P100. Thank you very much. Okay, that's not a sponsored announcement. All right, ethically scaling global emergence. What does that even mean? Hello. So we're going to talk about that, but first, do people know who I am generally, or am I new to some of you? If you do not really know me and my background, please raise your hand. Cool, good. Okay, well then this part will be useful. So I'm going to talk about what I call the 3 Daniels. And Daniel number 1 is this kid who had weird, meditative, interesting, energetic experiences as a child, and had my first, what you might call a Kundalini awakening or explosion when I was about 14 or 15 years old, and traveled out of my body for the first time, and very luckily did not tell my very kind Harvard, Yale, Harvard trained pediatrician father what was going on with me, because he now says he would have done something really stupid and harmful to me. And he's glad that I'm doing this project with some excellent people, a whole bunch of QRI and EPRC people are here, so great. And he is glad that we're working to upgrade the clinical mainstream's relationship to these things, so persons such as himself who mean well don't do bad stuff. Anyway, and then that's Daniel number 1. Daniel number 1 also then went on to have about 10 years of weird, energetic, strange mood and other phenomena. And then I started going on intensive meditation retreats in the Theravada tradition mostly, but with some other people, some Hindu Vedanta people, and some Vajrayana people, and some Zen people, and some magical people, and some non-aligned, who knows what they were people. And then eventually ended up something of an accidental expert in meditation territory. And then somewhere in the late 90s, I hung out a shingle and said, if you're having weird meditative energetic experiences, psychedelic, etc., I'll be happy to talk with you about those for free. And I still have that shingle out. And it turns out when you leave that shingle out for nearly 30 years, and you're also a doctor and write a book on meditation and found one of the longest running online communities where we talk about the deep end of human weird, it turns out you get to talk to a lot of people. And so I got to talk to thousands of people about their fascinating adventures and ended up becoming something of an accidental expert in the phenomenology, people's stories, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, various maps and systems and ways of thinking about this. And we all got to learn and grow together. And so that's Daniel number 1. And then Daniel number 2 over there was like school science and math and physics and chemistry and electrical engineering and public health with a whole lot of biostatistics and infectious disease epidemiology, hence the mask, and then eventually medical school and emergency medicine and healthcare administration, and then I retired 6 years ago. But Daniel number 2 got pretty nervous in his second year of medical school when he was told that because he had also been Daniel number 1, he was either crazy and or needed meds. When I was in fact hyperfunctional. That was not actually true, but there were about 10 of us in medical school and we all found each other and we had some pretty weird experiences, maybe done some psychedelics, a bunch of meditation, some spontaneously, some in other contexts. And the story they were telling us in medical school was obviously not true about psychosis and schizophrenia and bipolar and stuff like that. So anyway, but there's lots of cool things that Daniel too did learn about science and clinical medicine and how to help people and all kinds of other cool ways that really did save lives and make a difference, but not so good when it comes to this stuff. Anyway, and then about 4.5 years ago, when my fine friend Dr. Julieta Galante, an MD PhD with a public health degree, who was a senior postdoc in the Department of Psychiatry at Cambridge University on your fine and rainy island, came to me and said, hey, Daniel is the height of ridiculousness that with double doctoral degrees, I cannot talk about my most important experiences that happened to her in a yoga tradition. And she's like, it's crazy that at Department of Psychiatry, I can't talk about the most important things that ever happened in my consciousness at the very top of the thing. Will you be so kind as to come here and help me and some of my friends to start a project to upgrade the clinical mainstream's relationship to the deep end of human experience? And I said, certainly. So I spent the summer at Cambridge. And then this fascinating friend group that I had acquired through Daniel 1 and talking to all these weird people about their meditative experiences just happened to also include like neuroscientists at Harvard and Yale and psychiatrists and people at MIT and Berkeley and Vanderbilt and Stanford and all kinds of other, Oxford and Cambridge and all kinds of other cool universities. And before we knew it, and lots of other great people at universities just don't have such fancy names that do amazing things, Imperial College London and all kinds of other great places. And they said, hey, why don't we be the change we want to see in the world? And so we got together and Daniel 3 began to emerge. And Daniel 3, this is me at an unnamed university called Harvard, doing some neuroscience there about meditation, jhana, and scanner stuff, and some EEG and fMRI that I'm going to talk about later. But Daniel 3 was trying to figure out how Daniel 1 and Daniel 2 could get along a whole lot better in my microcosm, and then figure out collectively, anybody else kind of resonate with this story in any way, where you have these disparate parts of yourself? Raise your hands if you also kind of have something like this, right? So like each of our little microcosms reflect the macrocosm of a global system that is pretty fucked up when it comes to this stuff. Can we agree on that? Yeah, I think so. Okay. So Daniel number 3, and then everybody else had jobs and lives and kids and stuff to do, and I was like the retired guy with admin experiences who could build resources, and so I built websites and had some resources. So I ended up kind of the de facto administrator of something that became the Emergent Phenomenology Research Consortium. And there's my dad. Yay, great guy. Okay. And there began to actually be some crossover a little earlier than that. This is Judd Brewer's fancy algorithm, a beam-forming algorithm of EEG, looking at the PCC, which is the posterior cingulate gyrus of my brain, which is an important center for the default mode network. And this was, I think, when was this? 2014, I think. And during this time, they were trying to replicate some fMRI studies I had been involved in, because I learned all these kind of meditative skill sets. Daniel 1, learned a lot of meditative athleticism, basically how to replicate the experiments in the old books. I became totally obsessed with being basically a meditative athlete. And then it turns out that skill set turns out to be really useful for neuroscience. So these are me time-stamping shifts to various meditative states and stages. Does this look random, or does it look like there are some shifts you can kind of see when I go into certain states and stages that look kind of different? Yes, no? Anybody? You think so? I thought so. Anyway, it's kind of up here, and then I shift, and it's kind of way down, and then it shift here and it goes way down. The shift here and it stays way down, and then shift here and then it stays up, and then really up after those red lines. Each of these red lines is a timestamp. This is about a 43-minute meditation run. This is at the University of Massachusetts at John Kabat-Zinn Center for Mindfulness, after I had been in the scanner at Yale. And so when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, the technology is kind of getting to the point where we can kind of see some of this stuff. We can see some changes that are kind of relate to what I think of as the meditation stages I've been going through. And I was like, wow, this is super cool. So anyway, that was a very important formative thing that happened to me. And then this is Cambridge, where I got invited to. That's very cool. And then the Emergent Phenomenology Research Consortium. So maybe we should start with this first word, emergent. And I thank the good Dr. Katie Devaney, optical neuroscientist who was at Harvard at the time. And we were trying to figure out, what do we call this? Because spiritual, mystical, magical, energetic, psychedelic, some of these words people stumble over. Most of my clinical muggly doctor friends don't understand why seeing a bright white light or someone's arms flapping or trembling or feelings of bliss are necessarily spiritual or mystical even, right? Maybe they just seem like phenomena. And we recognize that the scientific word for a set of properties of a system that you couldn't have predicted from what you know about the underlying laws of the system as you understand them, from chaos, mathematics, and physics and biology, is actually emergence. These are emergent properties of systems we understand plenty about, of neurotransmitters and stuff, but we don't really understand how to predict. It's like the red dot on Jupiter. You can know all kinds of stuff about atmospheric stuff and weather and, all kinds of things, but we don't know why there's a red dot there. We can't predict it. And so we decided to use the word emergent because we thought that was a more technical term that could scale. And basically what we mean is the highs, lows, weirds, and plateaus of what most people would call spiritual, mystical, magical, energetic, psychedelic, and some other stuff. And just to give some examples, if you're wondering what in the world we're talking about, so this is highs or jhanas and peak experiences, and maybe some manic episodes, and various things being touched by the spirit, Christian conversion experiences. There's a whole bunch of different names for these things. And then lows, we've got stuff like dark nights and knowledges of suffering and some DPDR and probably some psychosis and probably some anxiety, depression, and like energetic chi, zen, shamanic sickness, whatever these are just various terms from the world that you see. And then weirds are like powers and psi and archetypal experiences and curious energetic things that happen to people, existential shifts, paradigms, out of body, near-death experiences, and probably some of things we would normally call psychosis. And then plateaus, basically lasting beneficial transformations and shifts. We're like you're kind of one way, and there's a big shift and you're kind of another way, but there's some real benefit there, hopefully. Although some plateaus can be lows as well, unfortunately. And there's all kinds of various names for this. How many people in the room have had any of these? Hands up. Nearly all of you. Cool, hello. Yeah, okay, good. So that's what we're talking about here today, and thank you. And we're not the only people that work on this, by the way. So it's not just the EPRC, there's the Varieties of Contemplative Experience Lab out of Brown with Willoughby Britton and Jared Lindo, and there's a bunch of other transpersonal groups, and there's all kinds of, there are a lot of people who work on this. There's a bunch of people doing psychedelic research, but in terms of really coming up with comprehensive categorization systems for these, it's pretty much the VCE lab and us. And they're close allies of ours in a number of ways. I work with them and help them, so thank you for them. Anyway, but basically we're talking about effects that can range this wide gamut from sensate, perceptual, arousal, temporal, sequential, spatial, dimensional, contextual, existential, psychological, emotional, volitional, archetypal, semantic, valence, aboid, cognitive, physiological, paradigmatic, kinetic, vocational, functional, behavioral, social, collective, cultural, expressive, medical, energetic, magical, and meta-emergent, meaning in the relationship to all of this. Does that kind of make sense to people so far? No, not yet. Okay, we'll try. And why we think this is important now is the practices that lead to this stuff are scaling. More people are meditating, more people are doing psychedelics and sweat lodges and fasting and ecstatic dancing and all kinds of things that can lead to these things, and sometimes they just happen spontaneously. Like happened to my mom when she was literally giving birth to me. It's part of my weird origin story here. So anyway, nobody ends up with mental health accidentally, let's just say. And mainstream clinical and public knowledge is not keeping up. So I just recently re-reviewed the textbooks of emergency medicine and emergency psychiatry, these things I studied for my boards in A&E, or emergency medicine, a long time ago. And they suck pretty much just as badly now as they did when I trained, which is awful because they were terrible then when it comes to these things. And so they try, but they just don't know. And so our job is to give them the information they need to know things and help people. Really quickly, how many of you have had or know someone who's had a life-changing emergent experience? Hands up. Yeah, most of you. Great. How many know someone who might be reasonably reluctant to share those with a boss or a physician or a mental health care provider? Anybody? And nearly all of you. That's predictable again. Preaching to the choir here, thank you. Amen. All right. How many of you know someone who had significant benefit, healing, or beneficial transformations or upgrades from something like this? Anybody? Anybody? A bunch of people. Cool. Yeah. How many of you know someone who had a significant challenge or something unwanted outcome in the short, medium, or long term for any of this? Had a hard time? Yeah, nearly as many. Okay, got it. How many of you think that emergent practices, experience, and/or transformations will be part of our global crises solutions, one way or the other? That these may be somehow important? Maybe half the room. Okay, cool. How many think that these emergent solutions can scale globally and sufficiently with an ignorant and sometimes actively harmful global clinical mainstream? A few people think they can scale with this in place. I applaud your optimism, and I hope you are right. Thank you. Anyway, we have an appreciated envy of the axial age, which, while not a perfect time, had a lot of really cool characteristics. There are a lot of the old texts, when you go back and read the old practice manuals from 1500 to 2800 years ago, they had really clear descriptions of phenomenology, of practices, of risk, benefits, and alternatives, warnings, promises, options, predisposing factors for things going well, chances of success or failure, tailored technologies for individual personality types or particular goals, a tremendous amount of sophisticated stuff. And we are trying to figure out how the clinical mainstream can have even just a teeny little bit of that. So we were founded in early 2020, as I mentioned. We now have over 250 global members, including some of you fine and excellent people here. Thank you for being a part of this organization. We are multidisciplinary, members of most of the world's top universities and all kinds of other excellent ones, again, that just don't have such fancy names. This is just a little smattering of some of the people, but it's actually way bigger than this. Katie came up with the name Emergence, there's Juliana Galante, there's Chris Terman, some other excellent, anyway, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. And then there's this. Oh, that turned out weird. Anyway, so there are a bunch of things that make our experiment kind of different. So I just want to talk about what we're doing. We're very grounded in the mandates of contemporary medical ethics. We're clinically focused, like we care more about outcomes than ontologies. We are strictly ontologically agnostic. This is a really important one we'll talk about in a bit. Linguistically descriptive, globally scalable, will not align with any particular tradition, results neutral, meaning whatever the data shows, that's hopefully what consensus shows. Systematic and strategic, so we have a massive white paper of like how to actually do this kind of global systems change, which seems totally fanciful until you recognize that, like, I was trained by the people who actually created the specialty of emergency medicine, what you would call A&E here. And you can actually do global systems change, and that system scaled around the world and made a huge difference, and you can actually do this, and they told me how they did it, and we're gonna kind of do the same thing for this. We're excited about that. It's functional. We really care about like what works and what really actually can scale. Outcomes-based. We hope this actually makes a real positive difference in people's lives. Data-driven, synergistic, meaning we're taking advantage of a lot of cool things that are happening now in terms of relative affluence, relative acceptance of these things from a historical point of view, a pretty clear mandate given that psychedelics are scaling and things like that. Better technology, better imaging, better data analysis, AI coming online to allow us to do levels of data analysis and neuroimaging we never could do before. And we actually have a comprehensive plan for global systems change, which I can talk endlessly about, but we'll try to summarize. So just to focus on the foundation of what we do is medical ethics. So medical ethics so the first thing is autonomy. Autonomy means that people should have informed consent. Everybody think informed consent is a good idea? Yes? Cool, thank you. Good, pretty much everybody. And that means high quality data on the risks, benefits, and alternatives of any diagnosis, treatment, or cultivation plan for the positive stuff, right? AKA you should have rights to know and be able to make good informed choices. And so I get questions all the time in my curious role. They're like, Daniel, should I do a 10-day insight meditation retreat, or should I take 5 grams of shrooms and a big hit of 5-MeO at the peak of it? What do you think? I get this question. I wish I had better data to answer it. I can answer it through my biased impressions and some, kind of ideas about whether or not this might meet their goals and their particular risk factors and risk tolerances, predisposing factors, and their responsibilities in life and where that might all lead. But what I would really like, the clinician in me, Daniel too, says, yeah, but what if you had better data on this to inform these kinds of decisions? Wouldn't that be kind of awesome? Anybody think this is a good idea? Yes, hands up. Thank you. Okay, good. And then justice, right? So there are people in the world who have a tremendous amount of knowledge about this stuff. They've been helping people deal with this stuff for decades, seen tens of thousands of people, and a few people have access to them, particularly if you have money and resources, or happen to live in a jungle, or happen just to live near a big meditation center, or happen to have cool friends who are into this kind of stuff. But the vast majority of people on Earth do not. And justice demands that we distribute the benefits of this kind of stuff evenly to people everywhere. So we are motivated very strongly by this ethic of how do we actually change global healthcare systems in a way that scales across cultures, that scales across the world, that helps reach everybody who is dealing with emergent phenomena and practices to do better and have better outcomes. So, and then beneficence and non-malfeasance are the last two, and then we'll talk about civil rights a little bit. This is doing good for the patient, which typically requires useful knowledge, and how to also, from a positive psychology point of view, how to increase resilience and well-being, how to modify lifestyle, how to modify the way people relate to whatever is going on with them, because life is a challenging thing sometimes, and avoiding harm, non-malfeasance, which is like not medicating like young children who might be having energetic experiences like my father admits he would have done to me had I told him what was happening with me. And that's not a great situation. So anyway, so figuring out how we can not needlessly pathologize and also make sure we have high quality data on how to support people to learn the amazing transformations that can come from this stuff. And then I think with regard to this stuff, civil rights were about like where we were in the 1970s with gay rights, is my guess, where like in certain settings and certain people and certain cultures it's okay to talk about, but you really wouldn't want to talk about it at most job interviews, or you wouldn't tell like your doctor or something because you risk being pathologized. So I think we're about 50 years behind where gay rights are, and I hope in the next 20 to 30 years we can make up some of that lost time. So anyway, ontological agnosticism. How are we doing so far? Is this still interesting? Is this okay? Cool? Good. Okay. Ontological agnosticism basically has not been tried yet. So when I spent my summer at Cambridge and then some of the time thereafter, I spent a bunch of time looking at previous attempts to do this. We're not the first person to have had this idea. It's not new. The cosmic consciousness people tried this in the 1880s, and then William James tried it in the early 1900s, and then you had the relaxation response people actually here in the UK that tried this in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and then we had Abraham Maslow in the 50s and 60s, and then we had Esalen, the transpersonal first and second waves, and people like Jack Kornfield and the mindfulness people kind of sort of until they started pretending this meditation never causes anything weird, which unfortunately is just totally not true, but anyway, it's how they sold it to the clinical mainstream. And then but nearly all of them were tied to some kind of ontological thing. And they wanted to push cosmic consciousness or divine love or something as the fundamental thing. And the ontology debates, everybody know the word ontology? No. Ontology is a statement of what truly is. So we can say, this is all the dream of the great god Vishnu. Or we could say, this is all a matrix, a simulation. Or we could say, this is all solipsism. One of us has created in their mind this whole crazy thing, maybe you. Or this is an emergent property of insensate particles and quantum forces and stuff by hand wavy, we have no idea. And so, and ontological agnosticism, we think, will help us cut through the cloud, because those debates are actually 2,800 years old. If you look back in the axial age, even at the dawn of it, they were still basically debating things like, monism and non-dualism and dual aspect monism and materialism and extinctionism and nihilism and all these divine love and divine consciousness. These are totally old ideas, and we have basically no new ones except a few funny things about microtubules and maybe some quantum resonance effects, and that's about all we got, right? It's still like we don't have a lot. Although QRI, I really appreciate Andrus's attempts to do things with topology and mathematics, and we'll kind of briefly hint at that because he's way better at it than I am. He really should be giving that talk. But so the EPRC recognized in the same way that, anybody ever had a migraine? Yes, a few people? Sorry. Anybody ever seen white wiggly lines or weird distortions with it? Yeah, right? It turns out in clinical medicine, you would think when someone's seeing white wiggly lines or something that we would say, you're hallucinating, you're crazy. We don't. We don't actually say that ever. We say you're having migraine with aura, is what we say. And I recognize, wait a second, if we can do that for white wiggly lines, why can't we do that for all kinds of other stuff? Like, and I never went to the level of, are the white wiggly lines the mind of God or a matrix? No, they're white wiggly lines, and I can say, oh, nearly pathognomonic for migraine. I don't have to get a head CT on you or expose you to radiation or do a bunch of labs. If you've got the other symptoms like nausea and lying in the dark and, oh, your voice is so loud, doctor, I can just say, hey, this is a migraine, and I can add value to your care, avoid wasting resources, and do something useful for you. That same exact perspective, we believe, can scale. Because in the clinical world, even though it seems like the clinical world would be the last place you would find a solution, we think the clinical perspective is both a problem and a solution, because we are totally used to stuff you cannot measure, that you cannot explain. We see all kinds of weird stuff in medicine. We don't know what the heck it is. I don't know what Kawasaki's disease is, this strange thing that messes up kids' hearts and causes fevers and stuff. We don't know what causes that. We don't have a clue. Well, we have a few clues, but we don't really know. We're like, sickle cell anemia, I've never been able to measure their pain, never been able to measure anybody's nausea. We just take it. They say, oh, I'm nauseous. I'm like, we're like strange stuff, like the mom says, something's wrong with my kid. You're the fool doctor who doesn't listen to that, even if they can't tell you why. They're just like, no, something's wrong with my kid. Okay, great, I will take you seriously, or end up in court. Basically. So we're used to complex and bizarre presentations, lupus, Lyme disease, multiple sclerosis, they can do all this weird stuff. So one of the common objections we get is that, yeah, doctors who hadn't had these experiences aren't going to be able to help you with this stuff. Well, I've never had any of these weird things that I know of, and yet I got pretty good at diagnosing them and treating them based on pure pattern recognition, what was in the textbooks, which for that stuff is decent enough. So anyway, speaking of textbooks, language. The other thing is most of these previous projects, they basically came up with linguistic choices that I can pretty much guarantee you are not going to scale. Like, I love the word kundalini. I literally use it nearly every day, talking to somebody about something. It's a great word. Do I think it will ever end up in the textbooks of medicine? No, which sucks. Like, that's terrible, but do I think it's going to end up there? No, I don't think so. ICD-11 billing codes out of the World Health Organization, which is how most of the world diagnoses stuff, I don't think we're going to see kundalini in there, which is too bad, right? But we need to come up with language that will scale, that doesn't freak out the Muggles or the Abrahamic traditions. There are plenty of indigenous traditions that argue about all this stuff, and they don't all agree. It's not like they're a homogenous bunch. They aren't. And so we have appreciative envy of the globally accepted lexicons of chemistry, biology, physics, biological taxonomy, and mathematics that basically they had all those fights in the 17, 18, early 1900s, and they're kind of done with them. And yeah, this may take a long time, but we are really hoping it doesn't take a century or two like it did before. And hopefully we can come to some consensus about reasonable terms that are just kind of descriptive and scalable. And so we're trying linguistic scalability is one of our things in a way that unfortunately like transpersonal psychiatry, which is totally cool, but there are linguistic choices like I would not have made those, let's just say. So we're also not aligned with any tradition, right? We're not coming at this saying Tibetan Buddhism must be the thing, or Christ consciousness or whatever. We are leaving space for all of those, for people to come in with their own beliefs and their own systems and their own language, and yet, by the way, there needs to be a technical lexicon among professionals where we help describe things that just add value to people's care without attempting to impose an ontology or a view, because I can guarantee you that will not work. As soon as you try to impose an ontology on a patient, a philosophical view, it does not fit with their culture or philosophical view. All you do is break the therapeutic relationship. You never change their mind. It never happens. So anyway, but telling people they're broken for life because they saw a rose in their meditative practice or something because they're crazy, not cool. Anyway, so we are not beholden to any specific things, and pretty much all we care about is that this help people and be able to scale, and how that works, we'll see. So this is kind of a roadmap. Ooh, that got a little bit messed up. That's interesting. Healthcare policy. Basically, we start with phenomenological approach. What are we actually experiencing? Colors, shapes, movements, patterns, sensations, effects, shifts. We need that as a basic information. Basically, the phone book, kind of like naturalists walked into the jungles and they just in the 1800s, and they just started describing everything they saw and writing it down. And eventually they noticed patterns between the things, like chrysalises become butterflies, cool things like that. And like, oh, this is kind of like that. Actually, this is a variant of that. This is another life phase of that. And then they started figuring out things like ecosystems and how things interact with each other. And eventually we got the whole amazing world we have in biology now. And it's not like other indigenous cultures hadn't done similar things. They had, so I don't mean to glorify the Western academic tradition, but that is kind of like how we think is a reasonable beginning. And then hopefully these will be able to come into some kind of flexible, expansile, clinically relevant taxonomies that hopefully in some way lead to something useful, right? That hopefully have some relationship to biology or something, not that brain is mind is meat or whatever, but and then for diagnostic processes, and most people think when I say diagnosis, I mean just something purely pathological, but I don't. So there are plenty of diagnoses that are actually not pathological, like pregnancy, right? Which hopefully is a happy occasion. It's how we all got here. And yes, things can go wrong in pregnancy, but pregnancy is just a statement of a woman is pregnant, which is a normal part of, obviously, how life goes on. So very good, generally. And so, like, diagnosis doesn't necessarily need to imply pathology. And then management and cultivation. And most people are going to see this one, but I really mean this one equally, which is for the challenging things that people don't like or finding disconcerting or confusing or whatever, how you normalize and manage those based on some kind of data. And then how do you cultivate the positive things, the deep emotional transformations, the positive states of mind, and that kind of thing. How are we doing on time? We're doing okay. When did we start? Yes, I think we're all right. And then, once you get these kinds of things, you can actually do epidemiology, incidences and prevalences and populations. So you can actually allocate public health dollars and figure out what kind of impact does this actually have on society. Because there are estimates that maybe up to 25%, or in this room, like more than half of people have had these kinds of experiences and had their life shifted in some kind of way. What is the economic and societal and family and community and individual impact of that? And then anthropology, sociology, and linguistics, these are these cultural things. It's very important this just be not just another colonialist, white male, top-down imperialist project, right? So having a lot of voices at the table and being able to get a lot of linguistic and global reach is extremely important to us. And thinking about anthropology doesn't mean just the needs of like indigenous peoples, but it also means like the needs of like insurance companies and the MBAs that control these systems, which almost never get mentioned in these talks. Because let me tell you, if you cannot reach them with something they need, which is quality metrics to get their Christmas bonuses or whatever, you're not going to change the system. So like taking into account groups like the lawyers and the MBAs and the government bureaucrats and the risk mitigation people and all of those are extremely important to understand what their needs are so that they can feel comfortable about these positive changes to help people. So, and then impact and analysis studies, have we actually done anything useful? And then how do you actually get this into healthcare policies, standards of care, textbooks of emergency medicine, psychiatry, neurology, general practice at a minimum, board certification criteria, psychiatry, psychology, etc. And for everybody who teaches meditation or facilitates psychedelics or even just ordinary people who want to know about, hey, these are cool things I can do with my brain, or wow, if this strange thing is happening with my brain, what do I do about that? In a way that is hopefully better than what we currently find on Wikipedia, which could be worse, but is not anything like as good as it could be. So that's kind of the EPRC, and then, since this is also a QRI meetup, QRI. Yay. Let's take a breath here. So QRI is building a new science of consciousness. They are an ally of the EPRC, and a number of QRI people are actually members of the EPRC, and we're happy to support them, and they're happy to support us, because we're really very similar in a lot of ways, but there are some important differences, which is great. They have a bunch of key focuses here, such as these. Healing trauma with neural annealing. Everybody know the word annealing? It's basically how you take something in the brain and make it kind of stick. So how you take a change and make it stick. Or if something is stuck that you do not like, how you shift it to some other way of sticking, right? So, and the solution to the boundary problem, so there's, which is an interesting one. This is related to the fact there are two kind of problems in consciousness. One is the binding problem, and the binding problem is basically like, how do you take all these disparate brain regions and from them come up with what appears to be a continuous three-dimensional whole. Sounds and sights and tastes and smells and our physical stuff and everything are all integrated in this incredibly cohesive, seemingly relatively seamless way. But then the boundary problem is also how from a mind-generated thing that appears to be just sort of fluff and consciousness do you actually get like lines and hard things and things that seem like they are actual boundaries. Most of these are equally perplexing. It's actually more complicated than that. Again, I wish Amos was here. And then like cool things like the hyperbolic geometry of DMT. And anybody done DMT? Anybody? Yes? No? Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty, you see some interesting geometry? Yeah? Pretty cool. Like, what does that tell us about the brain? What does that tell us about reality? What does that tell us about energy and the way neurons work and consciousness itself? Like, something interesting, you think? So, and this is based on the idea that mathematics and topology have been so unreasonably successful in nearly every other field of science that it's hard to imagine that they wouldn't have something to tell us about these kinds of studies. Logarithmic scales of pleasure and pain. So, like, typically as a doctor, we say, where's your pain on a scale of 1 to 10? But sometimes you get people who say 30, right? And so there is this idea that pain, some of the tales of pain and pleasure, particularly pain, can go way out there. Right? And taking that seriously and the implications of that actually for things like effective altruism. Anybody here know what effective altruism is? Have anything to do with it? Yes, okay, cool. So like, how do we take into account the super long tails of some types of suffering like cluster headaches, which are, or trigeminal neuralgia, or kidney stones, which I've had a number of, and they're truly horrifically not cool. That stuff about the pseudo-arrow of time. How in the world is time constructed from a moment that is always now? Like, how does that even work? That's a whole, presentists versus the eternalists versus the block theory, that's a whole thing. And then understanding valence itself. Like, if the goal is an enjoyable life, a pleasant life, a fun life, a good life. Does everybody think these are reasonable goals for us to be working on? Yeah, hopefully yes, a lot of nodding heads. Good, thank you. Yeah, so like, how do we understand valence, and what are the things about consciousness that we can measure, explore, explain, that help us understand what pleasantness even is? Why is it that certain resonant things feel really good? Why is it that like a major chord feels different from a minor chord or a tritone? Why is it that certain frequencies in meditation or in psychedelics feel jarring or incredibly pleasant? What is going on with that? And these are interesting questions. And here's a bunch of the principles of QRI. So to deeply grasp what creates meaningful existence, dramatically heighten the accessibility, breadth, and depth of positive consciousness experience, reduce the quantity of extreme suffering, eventually eliminate unnecessary pain and suffering, understand the mind, especially the nature of joy and suffering, understand computational properties of consciousness. Anybody done the tracer tool? This psychedelic tracer tool? Anybody? A few people. So this is this thing where like, you have like basically like a bouncing ball or something and it pulses at different frequencies, and you can kind of see where your brain is kind of resonating with it when it gets tracers and how long they last and some interesting things like that. And from that, you can actually figure out fundamental things about the pulse of consciousness itself, and particularly on different substances. Fascinating stuff. Anyway, to generate empirically testable hypotheses of consciousness. So again, while the EPRC is staying out of the what consciousness is debates, they're actually going for it, and I think that's really cool. And leverage a lot of different tools to help test some of these things, foster a culture of compatibility with things like the rational, muggly world, unify and clarify things about neuroscience and phenomenology, which the EPRC is also super big into, and map out the full range of consciousness experiences, which is also very much on the roadmap of the Emerging Phenomenology Research Consortium. We want to create basically the fun book, the exhaustive atlas of all this stuff with help from people like QRI. And so reducing suffering, increased well-being, exploring valence, the quality of pleasantness and neutrality, using an academic phenomenological approach, and we talked about the tracer tools, which interestingly enough shows that like DMT is at about 30 hertz and LSD at around 15, and psilocybin, mescaline about 12. So, and this is also a very collaborative thing, right? So we're working within academia and with its limits as well, and having some things that are kind of outside of academia. Checking out things about visual acuity and reaction time, and doing cool things like psychedelic encryption. Anybody look at their psychedelic encryption stuff? A few people. This is where they have like basically videos that if you're tripping, you can see messages in them, and if you're sober, you can't. Pretty cool. And we talked about these other things, boundary and binding. And how do you figure out ways to make people feel better? Okay, so you will notice some similarities here. This is where I really like these worlds converging. So this is from the QRI website, and it's basically like hours since drug consumption. It's kind of talking about how the valence might go through this extremely sort of funny thing where you kind of come up and you get down a little bit and then you go, woohoo, and then you're like, oops. And then like eventually you come to this place of equanimity. Anybody noticed something like that kind of arc to a trip of theirs ever, or a meditation session? Anybody? A few people? Yeah, right? So anyway, and then this happens to be from my own book, the Daniel 1 book, Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. This looked nearly identical. Anybody? Very, very similar. So this just had the kind of thing I was working on, describing the meditative path and pleasure and pain across various stages of insight. And this is actually from a paper from the EPRC, a framework for the empirical investigation of mindfulness and meditative development with Julieta Galante and Matthew Saket and people such as myself, where it also talks about these possible very non-linear relationships. Most people think meditation is like, oh, you just meditate, you get more calm and more happy and more peaceful and more wise and loving. Is that been anybody's experience? No. Okay, yeah. But that's how it's often sold, right? That has been your experience? Oh, cool, what's going on? Okay, sorry. Good. Anyway, but like, has anybody noticed this kind of weird unevenness where you go up and down, and it's challenging, and it's great, and then it's like, what the heck? Yeah, so anyway. So we're on similar pages there. How are we doing? We good so far? Yeah. So I'm just going to talk about a little bit of science that I've been doing. So I've focused mostly on the positive stuff in my own research that I've been doing. This is a paper that we got published with a bunch of cool people, and mostly out of Harvard, but also Utrecht and neuropsychology this year, and it's talking about something called cessations. And basically, this is me with a Cognax Quick 20R on my head. I was crazy enough to buy one of these things, and so I did a bunch of runs. And what a cessation is basically, I'm just gonna put this up here. So cessation is where you're going along what are called the stages of insight in the Theravada tradition. And you basically start out, well, this is what I do. You can, hopefully it has something to do with you. Drop down, on a breath, out into dissolution, through the dark night, fear, misery, disgust, desire, deliverance for your observation. Shift out to equanimity, space gets all flexy and flowy, and then you kind of disappear, reappear. And then there's this delightful afterglow. It's really nice. So what it feels like happens is literally all of the attention centers of the brain converge for 3 or 4 pulses in a row. And then you follow the last one down until it's absolutely gone. And then it feels like the mind restarts and comes back refreshed. And when I bought that fancy gizmo and started looking at my EEG data on MATLAB using EEG Lab, basically, I noticed if the thing happens right here, and you can see a bunch of the gamma motion artifact there. This is the frequency range, so we've got low frequency brain waves to high frequency brain waves. And this is something called alpha. Anybody know anything about EEG? So alpha is one of the primary rhythms of the brain. And it turns out that alpha, you see this big blue line? That's really weird and a strange thing to see. Right after one of these things, and a little bit before it, there's this massive drop in alpha power that actually is pretty much nothing else really quite looks like it. In the same way, this is what happens when fancy people analyze this stuff. So this is fancier EEG analysis than me, the amateur EEG analysis person, can do. And basically, if we start here, which is about 40 to 21 seconds before the cessation hits, you start to see down here in the occipital, the back region of the brain, which is where kind of like a lot of the 3D kind of visual space is constructed. Alpha power starts to go down, and then it goes down a bunch more, and then globally shuts down after. This is 20 to 3 seconds before the thing, and then 3 to 21 seconds after, there's this massive drop in this particular main pulsy rhythm of the brain, and then it starts to come back up over about the next, total 40 seconds or so. And this is actually really cool because this is actually important for what are called stages of awakening. Right? In a formal technical Buddhist sense, we have never been able to measure this stuff before. And now you can kind of measure it and say, hey, if people ever had these particular technical defined stages of meditation that you find in the old texts, and it turns out they actually have cool, unique EEG signatures, and you can actually publish papers on this stuff in top journals, so it's pretty exciting. Anyway, there's just more stuff about alpha power. If anybody's interested later, I could go over it, but I'm not gonna. And then there was another one, just this is more of the kind of work I've been doing recently. I was, about 2 years ago, I got to go to Harvard, which, Roger, where are you? Yeah. And you recently got to go play in the same study. Anybody else got to go play at Harvard in the study? No, okay. So basically, this is doing fancy meditative tricks. In this case, a 7 Tesla fMRI, which is a very, very powerful magnet. It's very loud, and your head's like strapped into this cage, and the whole thing's shaking. Anybody been in an MRI? You know? Yeah, it's jarring. And so trying to meditate in there is a real trick. But it turns out that, if you practice, you can learn how to do these, what are called jhanas, these deep meditative states, pleasant, initially very blissful and focused, and then eventually tranquil, expansive, spacious, very neutral, open, formless, very restful and peaceful, even in a very, very jarring environment. And so we did the biggest and coolest study that this has ever been done. And one of the measures we're going to look at in this kind of data, which I'm not going to talk too much about, but it's just regional homogeneity. And it's basically looking at work. So in fMRI, you're looking at the brain, and you're looking at the signal that comes from blood. So you're looking at blood flow and how much blood is going to a region as a proxy for function. Right, and when brain areas are functioning, or the blood supply, which controls sugar to the brain, is incredibly carefully controlled at the very small level of the brain. And so an area that's suddenly working harder, the blood vessels will open up and you'll get more blood flow to it. And you can look at something called regional homogeneity, which is basically looking at each little voxel, which is like a 3-dimensional pixel, a volumetric pixel. You can look at how it is lighting up, and if it's lighting up with the things around it, meaning there's something in that region going on, not just in that area, and then you can kind of average that over time and see which areas synchronize with each other and light up, and then you can compute some cool statistics from that. And this is me doing some jhanas, first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. Anybody know what jhanas are? No. This is a super quick explanation of what jhanas are. These are traditional Buddhist meditative states, what is called concentration, samadhi, or shamatha training. And there's a lot of debate and, terminological posturing about exactly how to define these things that I don't want to go into. But for the purposes of this study, what we're talking about is basically the first jhana is kind of like this. Steady, focused, silent, still. Mind is kind of doing that. The second jhana is kind of the mind going, wow, that's cool. And things are showing themselves to you and it feels really good. Third jhana is kind of like, oh yeah. It's kind of like you're ignoring the center, you're kind of detuning, just kind of going wide and spacious and tranquil. And then the fourth jhana is like open, inclusive, flowy, kind of neutral, very quiet. Fifth jhana is called boundless space. This is like, ooh, the room goes away and there's just this vast spaciousness. Sixth jhana is something called boundless consciousness, which is like boundless space with the lights on, kind of like presence filling everything. And then there's higher jhanas, but we'll talk about these for the moment. So the cool thing is, this is basically looking at all of the various brain regions, and then time averaging and sort of time sequencing when I shifted into each jhana, because sometimes it would take me a few minutes or a few minutes more. So you kind of time squish these things. And then you can look at basically these different states that I was able to flip into. And do these all look the same or different? Is this the same as this or different? Do these look different to you? Yes. And did they look kind of semi-reproducibly different, like in similar ways? Yeah. So what this is showing is that there are people who can be, you can train your brain basically to have the capacity to, in seconds or minutes, get into really blissful, peaceful states of consciousness. Even in a challenging situation, which is, from a mental health point of view, an absolute superpower. And so this was actually presented at the grand rounds of the psychiatry department of Harvard University, because this is groundbreaking stuff. This is the third fMRI study that's basically been done on meditators and scanners, and it's the biggest and best that's ever been done. It's getting better thanks to people like Roger over there, helping to have other people, other than me, get in the scanner and get a bunch of people and see what the data looks like and really compare how these things are and show that, hey, there are people who could learn to do this, and that means you all could learn to do this, hopefully, right? And this was an incredibly useful thing to be able to do because we have a mental health crisis in this country, and being able to rapidly access blissful, peaceful states, expansive, etc., open, very heartful, very nice states, is, again, incredibly useful, and I think it would be a moderately transformed world if people had quick access to these things. And so, like, this is the kind of initial work that helps us figure out, A, showing that this can be done, B, what it looks like, but even more important, how we potentially provide biofeedback tools so that all of you who haven't learned to do this can figure out where your own levers that help include and exclude and shape attention. Like how you can push away what we call the hindrances, the stressful states of mind, how you can turn up and dial up the peaceful, pleasant, expansive, tranquil states of mind, and how you can, learn to recognize what attention is doing and get it to do something that you think is really cool, right? Sound like a good idea? Yeah, so also very keeping in line with the stuff that QRI is working on, which is why we really like them. So this is just some biology, as my friend Willoughby Britton would put it, but it's basically showing certain regions of the brain in comparison to various control conditions. When we get into various genres, statistically and reproducibly shifted to ways that are more or less activated. This is way too complicated for an explanation now, just so you kind of know what this stuff looks like. And things about joy and mental ease, there are regions of the brain where you get more or less activation when these things go up or down. So equanimity, formlessness, and various genres. Anyway, I'm not going to go into all that. So how are we doing on time? We are close to time. So I'm just going to wrap this initial talk up by saying that I also do something called fire kasina. And fire kasina is an ancient pre-Buddhist practice where basically you look at a light source like a candle for a minute or so, and then you close your eyes and you follow whatever you see. And then when you get bored with that, you open your eyes and you look at your candle flame again. And you do that 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 hours a day for about 10 days. And it basically becomes like psychedelics without the psychedelics, except you built it on your own brain power. You can get into massive, chrysanthemums and scale sheets and undulating liquid jelly fingers and, incredible fractal things of like crystal squids and these massive, elemental flames and color washes and images and deep transformations of consciousness, as well as genre stuff we were talking about, as well as states of awakening and powers and entities, and all kinds of super wild stuff. And so I have an open science data set, and if anybody is interested in doing this, you can go to me at opensciencefoundation.io, and you can download this data set and take a look, and it's me like with, time to neurophenomenology and EEG stuff, and if anybody's interested in playing with us and seeing what it, or just listening to what it looks like, please join us for Open Science. Because we want people to have an appreciation of these things. Or if you have some EEG data where you're doing anything interesting like this that you want to lend to this, please let me know. How you can help if you're interested and inspired with this important and noble mission to help save the world. You can help reach out to us at the EPRC.org, info@eprc.org. Yay, thank you. or QRI at qri.org, as most of you probably know. This will take thousands of people to change global healthcare systems. We need people with tremendous numbers of skill sets, perspectives, coming from tons of different traditions, with different experiences, different cultures, languages, professions, and points of view. So if you're interested, please say hey. We need to raise awareness of this. This is going to take a global public campaign. It's more important that it gets done than really who did it or exactly how it gets done. And I also happen to be the CEO and board chair and one of the founders of the charity Emergence Benefactors, which, like QRI, is also a registered charity. We think ultimately this probably will cost about $1.5 billion, maybe two, to really do fully integrated 30, 40-year global systems change, which is a little less than it costs to get a single drug through the FDA that may just be some bullshit ARB or something we don't actually need. And basically, if you're wondering kind of what we aspire to be, think Templeton Foundation, if anybody knows who they are, or Wellcome Trust, one of these big things that gives a ton of money, but way more strategic, very long-termist, with a very dedicated plan, and dedicated to the deep end in the way that we particularly are. We have assembled a massive, incredibly talented, and awesome, and amazing team. Yay, thank you all. And if you have any idea where the rest of the money comes from, or if you happen to have some funds, reach out to me and let me know. None of it goes to me, by the way. I do this all as a volunteer, and actually as a philanthropist. I pay to play, as I say, so I help support this project. But some of these young people in the room who happen to be in this need to eat and have rent paid and pay for school and insurance and stuff and cars and things. So we need to be able to pay them to do this great work, and so that they are properly supported to do these noble things. So let me know if you have any idea where the cash comes from. And we're interested in your best ideas. Again, the EPRC has grown tremendously thanks to the good input and the critiques and the questions and the probing, like, what about this, that have come at us over the 4.5 years we've been around, and we are super appreciative of that. It helps make us better, and that's basically it. So thank you all. Questions, thoughts, concerns? I think that's about it. Is that about it? I think it's about time, yeah.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It's been my long-standing dream to meet you and finally in person. Couple of announcements. We have drinks in the fridge, they're free. We also have donation box, donations paid for drinks. If you like the meetup, consider donating. If you don't like the meetup, definitely consider donating so we can do better next time. But yeah, you don't have to donate, drinks are free. Other than that, some people joined later. We have an conference, so which means a participant organized conference. You are free to write a session in the red and yellow boxes over there for the schedule. And Daniel will have an entire table dedicated to him with several sessions written in. If you want to talk to something specific to Daniel, talk to me or to talk to him, and we'll write down a session there. Finally, yeah, I think we have a time for a couple of questions. So let's take some. Okay, over there. Can you come in here?
Hello. Hey.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks, Daniel, for everything that you're doing and for the talk today. Quick question around the study at the end, which I'd love to delve more into, but just high level, the people involved in that study and with the brain scans and everything.
Yeah.
Does it incorporate or account for like neurodiversity or neurodiverse brains at all?
Yes. So obviously, I am probably a touch neurodiverse. Did anybody pick up on that? Yeah, I'm probably a bit of an oddity. But we have, I think we currently have the funds for about 20 people. And obviously, there is probably something about super, sorry, it's a weird thing to say, but really high-end meditators who can actually perform in a scanner on demand with the time. Are we normal people? Maybe not. right? And that's important. But we are definitely hoping at some point to, so this is the first phase. So if you're looking at it from a strategic point of view, the first thing you do is you study the dramatic outliers that are going to make big, pretty pictures that people go, ooh, that is so cool, right? Because that's the easy way to then generate buzz and get money, right? And this is a real world, and we do need cash. What we hope to be able to do is then actually build something called the Emergence Research Center, where we then bring in wide ranges of people from a whole bunch of different meditative traditions and have them come and do whatever they do in the center, and then study them, all of the people who come to us, which is going to include a lot of people who are probably a touch more normal, whatever that means, recognizing that normal is obviously a severely problematic term when it comes to human diversity, but to assess that from that point of view, and then build up a much, much, much bigger neurophenomenological data set of people who have done whatever they do in scanners, and then get a much more appreciative sense of the range. So that is on the roadmap, but to raise funds and to make a bit of a splash, it's more strategic to start with something like this, if that makes sense. But yes, it is a really important question. And does that?
Yeah, no, it's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
One more question.
Thanks. I don't think, is it working? Yeah.
Yes, we're
Just bring it closer.
yeah.
Okay. It's not really a question, it's more like of a hunch to share.
Yeah.
Recently encountered the current iteration of the Antikythera project, which is like Benjamin Bratton and other people who were working in the Strelka Institute in Moscow before the Ukraine war. Now they're not, and they're doing these like short programs. They have like this tenet of how they're approaching philosophy of technology, which is rather than trying to apply existing philosophy to emerging technology, they're meeting technology as it emerges and philosophizing, which seems to me to share some kind of theoretical isomorphism with your approach of ontological agnosticism. They're looking at things. They're looking at global scale, and they are funded by the Gagarin Institute, which I think is very wealthy. So I like check them out.
Thank you. Hold on. Please, and if you have any connections to them or know anything about them, please let me know.
Okay, I'll think about what would make the most sense.
info@theeprc.org. Please reach out, and that sounds great. Wonderful. Thank you. Useful tip.
Thank you.
My brain and names is too glitchy to hold that. I'm a pretty smart guy, but names, not my forte. So I will need help with that. Thank you. Yeah, sure. Whatever you want to do.
Okay, one last quick question. Okay, over there, Roger. Oh no, that's not Roger. Sorry.
It's the Roger lookalike.
Yeah, Roger lookalike.
Is there any overlap between this research agenda and one on psychosis? And also, would that help with funding if you can kind of angle it as relevant to psychosis?
We actually do have people in the EPRC who study psychosis, specifically Clemens C.C. Bauer, and what they're primarily, and then we also have the people at Yale, the Yale COPE team, who are trying to figure out who were related to things like, the voice hearers and that kind of stuff, and trying to figure out, because that's a critical question. And actually, Brian Spittles, who also works for the EPRC and Emergence Benefactors, just published his PhD thesis on the challenges and potentials of how you maybe differentiate things like psychosis, bipolar disorder from spiritual stuff. So Psychosis, Psychiatry, and Psychospiritual Considerations on Eon Books. I think they're just having a sale, and it just got a really cool review from the UK organization, which is great. And so we have a number of people. Clemens C.C. Bauer is actually looking at basically taking people with really severe psychosis, really hard to manage, and showing how, in an fMRI, you can actually help them to figure out how to upregulate their executive control centers and downregulate their default mode network, meaning you can help them, which direction is kind of sanity, and the ability to have sanity being a funny word, but you know what I mean. and to have some kind of, and that's actually directly relevant to the PCC stuff that I was showing earlier with regard to meditation tricks and techniques. So we do actually have a number of people in EPRC who are looking through various lenses and points of view, and addressing the question of psychosis. It's an extremely important one. That is, and actually one of the next things we have going on is something called the Expert Opinion Project. We're going to ask, if we get enough money for it, 150 of the world's experts across a vast range of traditions and cultures and languages. Basically, things that look like psychosis, like to the clinical mainstream, are they? How do you differentiate them from maybe, what's good, what's bad, what's pathological, what's not pathological, and how do you apply things that are not all just atypical antipsychotics and Abilify and Giadon and stuff like that. What are your various meditative, emergent, psychedelic, etc. options, healing options, indigenous options, other options that can help people relate better to and have better outcomes related to visions and voices and very curious ideas about reality. So yes, we do have a number of people working on that, but if you know more, we're very happy to talk with them. Did that?
Yeah.
Yeah.